Okay, so let's get going. We are continuing in the book of Yehoshua from chapter 17 where we left off. And we've already started separating the land to the various tribes. Yehuda took in the south, and Yosef and his children took, Yosef's children, Manasseh and Ephraim, took towards the north of Israel. That's north of Jerusalem. And now in chapter 17, there are really two episodes relating to Yosef's children, to Manasseh specifically, two episodes regarding Yosef requesting more land. More land. One of them we know about from the Torah, and the second appears here for the first time. The first we hear about is the daughters of Tzlofchad. Beginning in verse number 3 in chapter 17, it talks about Tzlofchad and how his daughters requested an inheritance. So very briefly, just to review that issue, how was Israel divided? Did they take a census upon arriving and say, okay, this tribe has X amount of people, and let's give them a portion this big, according to their current size? That's one opinion. However, the other opinion in the Gemara, which is I think the dominant one, the primary one, is that Israel was divided according to Yotzei Mitzrayim, according to the number of people who left Egypt, which means anybody who was part of that first census, when the Exodus occurred, between the ages of 20 and 60, they received a portion in the land. Anybody who was born thereafter, or who was 19 years old when people left Egypt, he would not get a portion, his own unique portion in Israel. He's not part of the calculation when you're talking about divvying out the land, according to the population.
And this is what's the raya?
This is the verses in the Torah. This is the verses in the Torah. Which parsha will it be? Matos probably.
Matos and Masai.
Yeah.
There. So that's one view.
Yeah. So that Israel is divided according to the people who left Israel. So now this is where the daughters of Tzlofchad come in.
Yeah.
Tzlofchad was an individual who left Egypt. Excuse me, I said Israel. I meant Egypt.
Yeah.
Tzlofchad was an individual who left Egypt, which means he deserves a portion in the land of Israel. So he personally is not going to get it. His sons will get it, right? Problem is he didn't have any sons. So his daughters came and said, what's going to be? Our father is not going to get his portion in the land because he has no inheritors. It's just going to get absorbed into other families. Not fair. It should be that if a person has no sons, let his daughters who initially enter Israel, let them inherit the portion on his behalf. And Moshe says, let me speak to God about that. He says, yep, hen benot tzlofchad sodkot, you are correct. And that is in fact the halacha. That the halacha is that a man who inherited a portion in Israel and has no sons to inherit him will rather give it to his daughters. So the daughters of Tzlofchad here, they get their portion, and that's reviewed in chapter 17 in the beginning between verses 3 and 6.
Well, suppose, there are a lot of other questions, other scenarios, anecdotes. I suppose somebody doesn't have any descendants, men or women.
That's true. So usually what you do is, when it comes to inheritance, first you go down, you see, does he have any children? You go down in the lineage. Does he have sons? No. Daughters, when it comes to the portioning of Israel? No. If there's nobody going down, then you have to go up, check if he has brothers.
Yeah.
And so on. And if they don't no brothers, okay, go up to the father. Does the father have any brothers, etc.
But that's all bound up in this those Tzlofchad?
Yeah. Meaning, in the context of the laws of inheritance, that's when Benot Tzlofchad piped up. In fact, the Talmud says that they were very wise ladies. They're very wise because they knew when to speak. This claim that they had was around for years in the desert. And they all knew that this issue was going to arise, but they waited until it was the appropriate time to ask. Have you ever been in a setting when somebody just asks a question that's totally off topic, no connection whatsoever? It's a lack of wisdom. Those Tzlofchad are praised for their perfect timing. When it was time to discuss the laws of inheritance, those Tzlofchad said, okay, what about us? They waited, bided their time. You don't have to say everything that you're feeling right away. That's what we learned from those Tzlofchad.
Yeah.
I'm in a place.
Let the machers talk it out.
Exactly. Yeah, let them do their thing, and then we'll come in when it's appropriate. That's a very
All right.
important lesson we learn from women in Parshas Matos.
I never appreciated that,
Yeah,
that Torah here.
yeah, it's incredible. They came to the base Medrash of Moshe Rabbeinu and they gave their claim. Now, interestingly, they actually ended up with four portions, as follows. The remaining families of Menashe that would inherit in Israel were six. There were six families of Menashe that were inheriting in the land of Israel. One of those families was Tzlofchad's family. Okay, so excuse me, right? So six of the portions of six of the portions go to the families. Now Tzlofchad was a Bechor. He is a firstborn, so he gets an additional portion. You treat him as if he's an additional son, so he gets another portion. Tzlofchad has a brother who died without children, so these daughters are inheriting their uncle's portion as well. They get an additional one. And Tzlofchad, their father, also inherited a portion of Israel from his father, Chefer, who was also part of the sentence.
This is all Talmudic sourcing?
This is all Talmudic sourcing, yeah. The Gemara in Bava Basra goes through this at length. There's a whole chapter in Bava Basra, that tractate of Talmud, that deals with laws of inheritance. I think it's the 8th chapter of Bava Basra called Yesh Nochlim. And there's a whole section there dedicated to the daughters of Tzlofchad and everything we learned from them, and actually deals with a lot of the sections in our chapter that we're learning now. Okay, so it's important, right? So we read about it in the Torah, and that was theorized. And here in the book of Joshua, in chapter 17, it's brought into reality that the daughters of Tzlofchad get their portion at this point, and they actually end up taking 4 different portions: two for their father being the firstborn, one for their grandfather, and one for their uncle. So remarkable. These ladies came out good. Okay. Now we have another scenario that arose. The tribe of Menashe comes to Yehoshua and they say to him, "Our dear leader, you've given us our land, thanks a lot, but there's simply not enough space over here. It's too crowded. Thank God, we have tons of children, we're a huge population, and there's just not enough space for us to live." This is the origin of the phrase that they say in Israel, "Ze lo fair." Yeah, "Ze lo fair" means it's not fair. You're the first person in the land of Israel to say "Ze lo fair." "Ze lo fair." Where's our portion of the land? It's too cramped in here. So what happened here? This is fascinating. As we said, the land of Israel was apportioned according to the people who left Egypt. So when they left Egypt, the tribe of Menashe was at 32,000 people, 32,000 males between the ages of 20 and 60, 32,000. Later on in the desert, they proliferated. They had tons of children, and they ended up in the second census being 52,700. Okay, that's an increase. If you're counting, it's an increase of 20,500. I would like to share my screen to show you a beautiful gematria, because this is what the sons of this is what Menashe said to Joshua. If you look in verse number 14, it says, it's chapter 17, verse 14. The children of Yosef spoke to Joshua, saying, "Why have you given me an inheritance of only a single lot and a single portion, seeing that I am numerous people? For Hashem has blessed me to such an extent." So the word in Hebrew, Hashem has blessed me to such an extent, meaning he's giving me so many children. The word for that in Hebrew is ad ko birchani Hashem. Ko. To such an extent Hashem has blessed me. I'm going to spell that out on the screen for you. The Hebrew word ko is kaf, hey. There's a dot over here, and a hey. Yeah?
Right.
To such an extent we've been blessed. Do you know what the gematria of Chaf Hey is, the numerical equivalent of this word?
45.
25, right. The Chaf is 20, this is 20, and this is 5, 25. That word ko is a very specific word that they used. Hashem told Abraham, lift your eyes to heavenward and look at the stars. To such an extent, ko yezaracha, this will be your progeny.
Yeah.
25 is the number of extra kids that Abraham will have, so to speak. You're going to have 25 extra. So here we have a multiple of that. It's 20,500. That was the increase that Bnei Menashe experienced. They said, we've gotten bigger, 20,500, which is 25, which is another greater factor. So this is the beautiful remez that they said. 25 is a special number. It's a number of words in Shema Yisrael, or the number of letters, I should say, and other such things that Baal Turim connects. So they complain, they say, we don't have enough space. And the question is, I'm sorry, one second. Okay, I'll be right there. The question is, what do they expect Joshua to do? What do they expect Joshua to do? The plots are divided. Israel is already divvied out. You cannot just start taking from other people's portions and adding on to somebody else's. So there's actually a question amongst the Rishonim. Perhaps you could modify the size of each tribe's portion. The opinion of the Vilna Gaon was that they initially just decided which area each tribe will inherit in. And that was with the point of the lottery. The lottery will tell you what general area you'll get your portion. But the size, will tweak the size according to the size of the tribes. If Yehuda is very large, we'll give him a little bit extra from the tribe that's above him, from Binyamin. If Menashe is very large, we'll give him a little bit extra from his neighboring tribes, and we'll slice it up and apportion it out accordingly. That's the Vilna Gaon's understanding based on our discussion over here. How could they be asking for more land? It's impossible. So Vilna Gaon says, no, it was actually possible to get more. But alas, Yehoshua's response is not to give them more land. Yeshua's response is, go and conquer, go into the forest and raise down the forest and make your land a little bit more inhabitable. Conquer your enemies, clear out this area, and you'll see that there's a place to live over here. There's actually enough space for you. And so they didn't get any extra land, but they were told, go clear out the area.
You could, they were told that you could better utilize what you have by cutting and clearing.
My favorite story to tell the kids, the man who comes to the rabbi and says, Rabbi, I have 10 kids and there's no room in the house. I don't know what to do. Like we're bursting out of the boundaries, but I can't afford a bigger place. What do I do? The rabbi says to him, bring a goat inside your house. You know this one? He says, bring in a goat. And he says, well, are you serious? Did you understand my question? He says, yeah, bring in the goat. And a week later, the man comes back. He says, we brought the goat. It's even more cramped and it's a bigger mess. Like, what are we going to do? The rabbi says, he says, oh, you should bring the chickens inside as well. Oh, are you serious? Okay, Rabbi, if you say so. He brings the chickens in and the family's going out of their mind. There's filth and there's a big mess everywhere. And he's not sure what to do. Thank you, I'll come. So finally he comes back to the rabbi. The rabbi says to him, okay, you can take out the goat and the chicken. So they take all the animals out of the house and say, oh, what a relief. What a relief. What a spacious home we have. Rabbi, you're such a genius. Okay, so Joshua was telling them to some extent something like that. He's saying, just utilize the place you have better. You have actually land that's inhabitable. You just have to make it so. Work a little bit. The Gemara in Bava Basra actually says that Yehoshua was telling them something else as well. He's saying, you are such a numerous people, go and hide yourselves amongst the trees of the forest to protect yourself from ayin hara, from an evil eye. A person should not flaunt his bounty, should not flaunt his wealth, the blessings that Hashem gives him. You should be grateful for them, but we shouldn't rub them or shove them in other people's faces, right? We share in simchas with people, but we shouldn't, to drive around in a super flashy car and wear super flashy clothing and then show people how fancy and rich you are. That will, God forbid, subject a person to ayin hara, to the evil eye, because evidently the external eye, watching and desiring and coveting and questioning whether the person deserves that thing, can actually have a negative impact. Did you know that there's a prohibition to gaze upon a person's field if it's full of produce? Right? You're walking out in Pennsylvania and your neighbor in the middle of the high season for wheat, right? It's harvesting season, and you gaze out upon your neighbor's field to see, oh wow, he's got so much wheat. He has such a good crop this year. You shouldn't do that, because we might, God forbid, bring into question whether he deserves it, and it could have a negative impact. This goes so far that the Chazal say that the first tablets were destroyed and the second weren't. Why were the first tablets that Hashem gave us destroyed? Because they were given in public. Everyone was watching, everyone was listening. There was a huge fanfare and lightning and everything like that. And that's too public, and that was subject to ayin hara. So even the miraculous things such as the tablets it needs to protect itself from the evil eye.
And even though your neighbors in Pennsylvania may not be Jewish, you still can't envy.
Yeah, that's correct. We shouldn't give ayin hara to anybody. It's a matter of being a good citizen as a third. We don't want to damage the people around us, right? No matter who they are.
I'll keep it in mind.
Yeah. When you go to your vacation home in Pennsylvania.
We were there a couple summers ago. It's very nice.
I like it there. It's very peace and quiet is something.
Yeah, and the corn, oh my gosh.
Yeah, lots and lots of corn. Yeah, there were silos left and right. So Yehoshua here was telling them something similar. Hey, you're telling me you're so plentiful? Better that you shouldn't expand outwardly. Go find some more place in your own land, so you shouldn't be subject to ayin hara. Right, and that's chapter 17. We deal with the land given to Joseph's children, Menashe and Ephraim. Now, chapter 18 opens with a very significant event, and that is the transferring of the Mishkan to Shiloh. The Mishkan was the tabernacle, that basically the traveling temple that the Jewish people had in the desert with them. When they crossed into Israel, they left it at Gilgal, and Gilgal until now had been their home base, their headquarters, their hub. They would always come back to there, and everyone was kind of camped around Gilgal. And now, in the beginning of chapter 18, it says, Vayikahalu kol adat bnei Yisrael, the entire bnei Yisrael gathered together, Shiloh, in the place called Shiloh. Vayashkinu sham et oel moed. And over there, they established the tent of meeting, which was the Mishkan. Va'aretz nichbasha lifneim, and the land was conquerable now. So what's happening here? They are not suddenly, but they're transporting the Mishkan and fixing it in Shiloh. It will remain there for 369 years until it's taken captive by the Philistines. We'll see later. It will remain there for 369 years, and this will become the new center in Israel. In the Torah, I wanted to bring up a Sefer Devarim here, where we see there's actually two phases of having a temple in Israel. Let me pull up the verses. All right, pardon me. Yes, I'm going to share the screen so we can see it together. What I have here on the screen is the book of Devarim, of Deuteronomy, in chapter 11. How do I move it down? Sorry, whoops. Okay, no. There it is. Make it bigger. Okay. And Moshe is addressing the people, and he says to them, you are about to cross the Jordan to enter and possess the land that Hashem is giving you. When you have occupied it, then you will occupy it and settle it. You should do everything that I'm telling you, etc. You should destroy the idols and eradicate it from the place. Here we go. Here we go. Okay. Because you have not yet come to the allotted haven that your God has given you, etc. And then in verse number 10, it says, when you cross the Jordan and settle in the land that your Hashem has given you, and God grants you safety from all your enemies around you, and you live in security. And you will live in security, and then Hashem will have a Mishkan for you. You should set up the Mishkan over there. Basically, it's describing two different phases. There is crossing over the land. There's crossing over into Israel before resting from your enemies, and then after being granted safety from all your enemies, then you come to the place where Hashem has given you. This alludes to two different phases. What's happening here, I didn't get the verses all out in one section. I apologize, but basically there's two different phases of the Mishkan. One is when you're still in the midst of fighting with your enemies and conquering the land, the Mishkan will be in one mode. And then once you've rested and there are no more enemies to conquer and fight, then you will come to the place that I've given you. So one could have asked, you have Gilgal, you have Jerusalem, go straight to Jerusalem and build the temple. No, you cannot build the temple until you've rested completely from your enemies. The first phase has to be set up a semi-permanent structure in Shiloh while you're still fighting the wars and clearing out all of the enemies. And then once that's done, 369 years later, then you can go and move and build the temple in Yerushalayim. Okay, so this was a necessary dwelling place for the Mishkan. It became a little bit more permanent. Until now, the walls were made of wood, and now they're going to be made of stone. It's a little bit more permanent, but the roof is still made out of curtains. Whereas the temple is a big, powerful structure. So it shows like a sort of transitional phase.
What's the purpose of this staging?
Very nice. So one part is we wanted to make Gilgal was a little bit off to the side. Shiloh is a little bit more in the midst of the camp. Joshua is saying, I'm going to move the Mishkan into your midst and give it a more permanent home in Israel. I'm going to let it lay its roots. The Kedusha, the sanctity of the Mishkan will imbue itself into Israel, and that merit will enable you to conquer your enemies easier. This is how Rashi explains it. We're transferring the Mishkan to a place where you'll now be assisted in battle. You'll have more spiritual help and divine guidance in fighting your battles. Now that the Mishkan is a little bit more of a fixed place. It can't be permanently fixed because you still are in the midst of fighting, and Hashem cannot dwell completely in such a stage. But now there's a little bit more fixed, you'll have a little bit more siyata d'shmaya. Does that make sense?
It does, but and I wouldn't call it Yachish B'Shmayim, I'd call it Shechina.
Shechina, yeah, you're right. And in fact, that is exactly right. It's where Hashem dwells amidst us. Hashem dwelling amongst us, that has good side effects. We conquer our enemies. We don't suffer losses. There's another point here, which I heard in a recording from Rabbi Menachem Liebtag on the OU. He presents Tanakh. And he says, this was kind of a kick in the pants to the Jewish people.
Yeah.
They were getting too comfortable. They were all camped around Gilgal. They got rid of their main enemies. And if you think about it, until now, for as long as they've lived, they've all lived in pretty close quarters. In the desert, yeah, they had separate stations, but they were all huddled around one Mishkan. And in Israel, for the past 14 years, they've all been crowded together in Gilgal. And now Joshua is telling them, go, I want you to go scatter, go conquer your individual portions and scatter yourself outside of Israel, across the land. And they're all a little bit nervous and hesitant to go. This is a new phase of life we're not familiar with. We don't know what it's like to live far away from our brethren.
You're far away from the shopping centers. What the heck?
Yeah, well said. This one, he's being asked to go all the way up north. He's going to be in Tveria and he's going to be in Beersheba. What's going to be? We've never lived like that. And we're so comfortable here. So what Yehoshua does is he kind of shakes things up a little bit. He moves the Mishkan away from Gilgal to leave them kind of like homeless almost, right? Now that place that you were comfortable in is no longer there. It's no longer the center. He just dissolved and evaporated this place which used to be the main hub, Gilgal, and now he's forcing everybody to get on the move. Yeah, like let's get going, right? It's like a glass of cold water in their face. Wake up, you got to go conquer the land. So he moves the Mishkan to kind of shake up their feeling of comfort and permanence.
Yeah, that's a really good lesson.
Yeah.
Where was Shiloh located?
Let's put it on my map and I'll show you exactly. I pull up a map on the internet to show.
I wish I could find the maps that Rav Liebtag gave me.
Maybe Liebtag gave you maps?
Yeah, I have to find them. I have no idea where they are.
That would be helpful. I find no map quite does it perfectly. I keep having to switch around. So here I just found one online, and hopefully it will be helpful for us. Okay, here we are in Gilgal. You see my cursor here?
Right.
Yes.
This is around Gilgal. That's right by the crossing the Jordan.
Okay.
Shiloh is a bit further in this area, in a section of Ephraim.
Okay, yeah,
Okay, a little bit more in the midst of the land.
that's a great map.
Yeah, I like the colors here. It's a lot more helpful
Yeah.
than some of the others.
Sure you didn't bring it home from school?
Yeah, it helps, it's pleasing to be able to see things divided a little bit. And also it's useful to look at now as we're discussing the division of the territories. This is basically the again, nothing's exact and there's some dispute about how things are divvied out, but this is actually a useful thing to look at. So here's Shiloh right here, a little bit more central. An interesting change takes place. This is a halachic point. Until now, anytime a Jew wanted to bring a voluntary sacrifice, he would set up an altar in his backyard and bring a voluntary sacrifice. Say, oh, Hashem, I love you so much. I want to bring a peace offering. Go ahead, you build an altar. Hey, Dad, let's get the altar ready. You take out the wood from the shed, you make an altar, you take out your stones, and you bring a sacrifice in your own backyard. Now that the Mishkan is planted in Shiloh, it is forbidden to do that anymore. The only place to bring a personal offering is in Shiloh. So if you lived down in Hebron, in the tribe of Judah, you have to schlep all the way up to Shiloh to bring your offering. And if you lived in the west where Dan is, you'd have to come all the way over to bring your offering. I think the reason for that transition, that halachic change, is specifically because now the Jews are going to be scattered out across Israel. Until now, they're all living in close quarters. So you can bring an offering in your backyard, but no one's going to mistake and think that that's the main service. We're all still connected to each other. But now that we're scattered throughout Israel, we have to have a central hub and something that's going to force us to come back and meet and constantly direct our attention to one central point. So therefore, there's a halachic change that takes place here called Isur Bamos, the prohibition to build your own private altar in your backyard. From the time that the Mishkan was established in Shiloh, it became prohibited to make your own private altar. And that's a significant thing that happened historically at this point. Okay, so Joshua says to the people, I'm going to now, we should be able to get through the end of the chapter here. Joshua says to the people, okay, it's time, don't be lazy anymore, go and start conquering the land. And the first thing they do is they send out groups of 3 people, a bunch of groups of 3 people to survey the land, to evaluate which property is worth what and which areas are appropriate for whom. And they basically drew out lines to delineate the rest of the, I guess, there's 7 properties left, 7 tribes left that need to inherit. And they drew all the lines out. They sent people all across Israel to do that. And the next inheritance that we hear about is in verse 11 in chapter 18, which is the tribe of Binyamin. Binyamin very significantly and symbolically is between 2 tribes. Binyamin is the area of Jerusalem. South of him is Judah. The north is Yosef, Ephraim and Manasseh, Yosef. Isn't that so significant? Binyamin being sandwiched between Yehuda and Yosef. Where else have we found such a thing? Not just geographically. Where do we find Binyamin in the midst of Yosef and Yehuda?
Vayigash.
Egypt, in Egypt.
Very good. In Vayigash, you have the 2 forces coming together over Binyamin. I thought that was very symbolic. I'm not sure what to make of it, but there's certainly something.
Pachad Yitzchak has a long piece, I think, about that, but I don't remember where it is.
I'll
see if I can find it.
Thank you. I would love to see that. It drips with symbolism. You know something's happening there. Yeah. That he's couched between them, and that's going to be the place of the temple is Binyamin. There is some in verse 28. It says Yevusihi Yerushalayim. It says Jerusalem goes to Benjamin, to Binyamin, but there's a place called Yevusi. which it also says is Benjamin. So the problem is we know that it belongs to Yehuda. So is it Benjamin? Is it Yehuda? So the question is, there might have been a strip of land of Yehuda's that protruded into Jerusalem, and exactly on that spot is where the altar was in the temple. Meaning to say that the temple was a fusion between the portions of Yehuda and the portion of Binyamin.
Right.
Portions of Yehuda and Binyamin. The fusion of the two of those, as if to say the children of Rachel and the children of Leah, Yehuda representing the children of Leah and Binyamin is Rachel's. Right there, the mixture between the two of them creates the temple.
Yep.
That's a point in verse 28.
Well, why do Chazal hold that, from Vayechi, that the temple was really located on Yehuda?
So
They go by the blessing from Yaakov?
yes, I think over there perhaps it says Ubein Ketefav Shechen. Is that Moshe's blessing? I don't recall now. Ubein Ketefav.
Shefav Shachin is from V'zot HaBracha.
Yeah, right. Why would I know if I heard it if it wasn't for Zot HaBracha? I'm not sure what you're referring to. There is a Gemara in Zvachim, page 53, Nun Gimel, devoted to the exact placement of the Beis HaMikdash. It's actually a conversation happening between David HaMelech and Shmuel HaNavi about where the exact spot for the temple is. And they're bringing proofs from the blessings of Yaakov and the blessings of Moshe about the tribes. I don't recall the particular proofs, and you probably know better than I do about that perhaps there is a reference to Yehuda having the temple in his portion, but that would be this, that there was a strip of Yehuda's land protruding to the place where the altar was. Okay. There's a lot of goodies here. It's Mariv now, so I'm gonna cut it. I'm gonna cut a little short today, and God willing, next time we'll get I'll get very close to the siyum, the conclusion of the book of Yeshua. Hope you all have a wonderful night.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Bye bye.
Beautiful
Night.
thoughts.
Good night.